Hello, and thanks for tuning in to today's episode, part 1 of 2 on the types of addiction in this Nature of Addiction series. In the next series, I will get into the transformational recovery process, but for now, continuing with a few more episodes dedicated to addiction itself. For the most part, the different types of addiction are known, or they're at least more apparent when they're pointed out, because there's a lot of addictive things in our culture. But since a few addictions take the limelight, I wanted to dedicate an episode to acknowledge a fuller perspective of the different types of addiction in our culture. But as I've been saying, addiction does not stop at drugs. There are a lot of addictive rituals that our very culture and society are built upon. People can become addicted to tangible and intangible things, visible and invisible things, energizing and relaxing things, and recognized and unrecognized things to varying degrees of benefit versus cost. Tangible addictions are things you can actually touch or hold, such as a cup of coffee, a donut, and a cigarette. Intangible addictions are things you cannot touch, such as addiction to being right, playing the victim, or creating drama. Here, there is not a thing other than the attachments within you. Visible addictions are things you can see, such as addiction to television, social media, and pornography. This would include most substance addictions because you can see the thing in your hand. Invisible addictions are things like flavoring and chemicals in food and products that people are not aware of. Many people are addicted to MSG, for instance, but they have no idea what MSG is or that it's even involved. And in fact, many foods have a number of additives included for the purposes of getting people hooked specifically, but people are unaware of these micro-ingredients. Energizing addictions are things like sugar, stimulants, gambling, and adrenaline sports. Relaxing addictions are things like depressants, television, and gaming. What is interesting here, though, is that what is energizing for one person could be relaxing for another person, and vice versa. For instance, while wine and cannabis can wake one person up, it might put somebody else to sleep. As for recognized addictions, these are harder to deny, the ones that take the most work to maintain with the most noticeable consequences. The most popular things that come to mind when people think about addiction, I'd say, would be cigarettes, drugs, and alcohol. And more people are starting to acknowledge the prevalence of sex and pornography addiction as well. Unrecognized addictions are those that the masses collectively agree not to acknowledge as addictions, allowing everyone to indulge and benefit without judgment. Commonly ignored addictions are the excessive use of sugar, the constant use of devices, and needless shopping. So let's take a look at 8 different categories of addiction and different types of addiction within each category. There is not one particular way to classify addictions, and it would be hard to name every single one since people can become addicted to about anything. Additionally, different types of addiction can range across generation and culture. I will also mention that there is a spectrum of addiction, from mild to moderate to severe. The mild addictions are easier to manage. Moderate addictions are going to require a bigger investment and show more consequences. And serious addictions are full-time jobs and will have serious consequences. So, on some of the things mentioned next, it could be argued that they are not real addictions. However, on a spectrum, they do show the same characteristics of having to have something to create or escape a feeling, not being able to stop the addictive behavior despite the consequences, and experiencing discomfort in the absence. Mentioning a wider spectrum of addiction is not meant to take away from the real battle of hardcore addictions, but rather to bring awareness to this phenomenon throughout society. I see and hear people all the time criticizing someone else for addiction when they themselves cannot go 24 hours without a whole list of things of their own. As I will share in the next series on transformational recovery, if we want to help other people to transcend addiction, we have to find where addiction exists within us and transcend it ourselves first. So here we go. Types of addiction in 8 different categories. Number 1, flavoring in food. Perhaps the number 1 addiction in the world is addiction to sugar, salts, and other flavorings that are added to prepared and processed foods. I am not talking about attachments to foods, but actual addictions to food. The having to have certain foods every day to self-regulate, regardless of toxic buildup and life-threatening health concerns. A person cannot control their eating habits and will experience discomfort or withdrawal in the absence of these foods. Like drug addiction, toxic yet tasty foods trigger a feel-good response in the brain, which releases neurotransmitters like dopamine. A person begins to associate eating with pleasure, and this is where addiction begins. The neurochemical rewards from certain foods can override the brain's signaling of being full and satisfied, or even sick and uncomfortable. So a person keeps eating to satisfy the unsatisfiable emotional hunger. Hence, people tend to go after foods that offer immediate benefit over foods that will benefit them in the long run. The underlying causes and correlations of a food addiction are very similar to any addiction. Using food as an escape, to numb feelings, or to avoid underlying fear, anxiety, anger, trauma, grief, or shame. It is likely that just as many people turn to food to satisfy their emotional body as they do to satisfy their physical hunger. There are many precursors to food addiction on top of one's own inner burdens and pain. First off, every culture has their share of toxic and even fake foods that are sold to the public as healthy and perfectly fine foods to be eating. People do not tend to get addicted to live, healthy, and nourishing foods like they do dead, toxic, and dehydrating foods. And this is due to all the additives, chemicals, and flavorings that are put in food and beverage products to purposely get people hooked on these products. Children's food, for instance, is some of the worst food on the market. It is made to look good and to taste yummy first over health and nourishment. So kids grow up on this toxic food, becoming addicted at a young age. And then these unhealthy eating patterns, they continue into adulthood through processed junk food that is conveniently and affordably located at every stop, such as gas stations, grocery stores and drugstores, or restaurants, shopping malls and movie theaters, or schools, hospitals, airports, and so on. Common addictive food flavorings and additives are natural and modified sweeteners like sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and plant and animal flavorings of all kinds. Artificial sweeteners found in common tabletop brands such as Sweet and Low, Equal, NutraSweet, Splenda, Sweet One, and so on. And concentrated salt mixtures such as MSG, artificial dyes of every color, hydrogenated oils, trans unsaturated fats, parabens, and synthetic hormones, as well as solvents that dissolve or dilute, acidulants for acidic taste, loading agents for volume, emulsifiers for mixing, sequestrants to mix chemicals, thickeners for form, gelants for texture, moisturizers for moisture, gasifiers to release gas, and countless other additives and preservatives. And on top of all of this, there's a list of heavy metals and other exotoxins, neurotoxins, and carcinogens, as well as pesticides and herbicides, and even pharmaceutical ingredients makes its way into food flavorings and preservatives. And some of us even know worse things that are put into food. Not only are these ingredients addictive and toxic, leading people to return to them uncontrollably, but the impact of eating these ingredients on a daily basis works to deteriorate the mind and body. These toxic and addictive ingredients create a new ecosystem and microbiome from the gut to the brain, which makes it extremely challenging for people to even recognize what's going on. And this is because the toxic buildup and the addictive nature controls one's thoughts, desires, and behaviors. Symptoms of food addiction are compulsive overeating, indulging in junk food, continuing to eat when already full, having more than you wanted to, unable to set boundaries with food, having to have particular foods every day, and at the same time using food to avoid emotions, excessive guilt, or shame around your relationship to food, trying to stop but having little control despite negative consequences, unable to commit to changes in diet, experiencing constant relapse, indulging in food in isolation, and missing important responsibilities or commitments due to eating. Additionally, needing more and more food to get the same satisfaction as before, and experiencing withdrawal symptoms in the absence of these favorite food flavorings, such as anxiety, irritability, or anger. And I would list these known side effects, but I would have to literally list every symptom and every known illness and disease to illustrate what these addictive food additives are doing to the human mind and body. People turn to food to relieve the mental and emotional and physical discomfort, but the result is that these methods are further draining and depleting the mind and body and taking years off people's lives. Now, the opportunity is to observe your relationship to foods, identifying toxic and addictive foods that you can reduce or eliminate, and all the rich, nourishing superfoods that you can incorporate into your life to improve your overall mind, body, and spiritual health and wellness. We will talk about this more later, but the process begins with awareness and continues through integration of healthier ways. Now, turning to the next category of addiction. Number 2, stories on screens. Screen addiction affects a large majority of the global population. Society is addicted to the stories created and engaged through screen time. This is a growing concern with the constant emergence of new technologies taking precedence over vitality in life. Screen addiction is characterized by excessive or poorly controlled preoccupations, urges, or behaviors regarding cell phone, computer, and internet use that leads to impairment or distress. Like any addiction, the behavior is progressively addicting and people cannot control themselves despite negligence of responsibilities, missed opportunities, and negative consequences. Screen addiction has been described as an impulse control disorder by behavioral health experts and functions as an escape from real life. It's another one of those addictions that can be hard to identify because constant use of technology has become the norm, and many people have to be on their technology many hours a day for work and school. Screens are on devices that connect to Wi-Fi and radio frequencies, the Ethernet, cable television, and global positioning systems via flat screens, desktops, laptops, iPads, Kindles, iPods, cell phones, and even nowadays things like goggles, watches, and rings. Screen addictions include everything from television, movies, and entertainment, news media and social media, activity and performance applications, gaming and gambling, online dating, pornography and sex work, shopping and e-commerce, internet browsing, research and knowledge seeking, work projects, production and business, and a long list of underground black market deals and exchanges. Billions of people use and rely on screens daily, and an estimated 3/4 of these people hold on to screen devices nearly 24 hours a day, such as keeping the television playing around the clock, sleeping with cell phones, or wearing an Apple Watch. Screens are used for all of these purposes and also serve as a distraction from the higher order and purpose of the human experience. People are turning to screens for an escape, to fulfill a void or an unmet need, to feel a sense of connection and meaning, to function and keep up with the world, and also to feel alive and excited about things. Internet and screen addictions immerse people into a fantasy land of sensations, whereby online connection is replacing real-life connection, inhibiting people's ability to function and grow in relationships. Any block of time, whether on the road or showering, at a stoplight or checking out in a store, during work, during dinner, or even during sex, people seek this kind of stimulation. Signs of technology addiction include prioritizing technology over self-care, always checking messages, being a slave to the dinging and ringing, always having to be with technology and getting frustrated when something disrupts it, lack of privacy with personal sexual content online, satisfying needs for stimulation, connection, and meaning through technology, and replacing the real world with the online world. While most people can more easily unplug from screens and internet and spend quality time with their family and their friends, for other people it can create a tremendous amount of anxiety when they are forced to be without their computers, phones, and tablets. The cost and symptoms of screen addiction include physical strain on the neck, head, and body posture, the dulling of senses and loss of hearing and eyesight, mental problems and obsessions, yet being in denial, emotional imbalance and irregulation, poor self-care, sleep deprivation, and excessive stress, lack of personal agency and inability to follow through, the lack of social connection, social awareness, and communication skills, and one's mood becoming dependent on online validation. By bringing awareness and intention to your relationship to technology and screens, you can exercise more discernment in how you use your devices. By understanding the uses and benefits, or the addictive tendencies and the drawbacks, as well as other influences and concerns like Wi-Fi radiation and toxic electricity, can naturally serve to redirect your focus and energy in healthier ways. Turning now to the third category of addiction, which is euphoria of plants. When people get high, they are usually getting high off of substances derived from plants, whereby some part of a plant is extracted, refined, and processed for euphoric consumption. Common plant-derived addictions refined into a product are coffee and tobacco, sugar, flour, and cacao, cannabis, kratom, cocaine, and heroin, and wine, beer, and liquor. Plant-derived addictions are substance and drug addictions essentially. Sugar-related addictions, alcohol products, and legal plant substances can either be purchased or they can be made at home. Now, illegal substances that are derived from plants, such as street drugs, are often found on the streets and produced by underground suppliers. These plant-derived drugs are often preferred because the supply is more consistent, affordable, it's more secretive, autonomous, and effective, at least in the moment. Now, there are a number of immediate perks and benefits from plant-derived substances. People use drugs to cover up painful memories from the past, to self-medicate stress and discomfort in the moment, and to relieve fears and worries of the future. Sugar indulgers and alcohol and drug users experience euphoric highs to peaceful and relaxing lows, increased focus and drive for particular things, and enhanced creativity, confidence, and purpose. People believe that these plant-produced substances are helping them. They didn't mean to become addicted. They were trying to ease their suffering, find relief, or just feel better. But over time, they become addicted, and not just to the drug, but also to the ritual, the lifestyle, the network, and the duties of the addiction. So when they come to recognize the consequences, they still feel that the benefits outweigh the pain and problems that await them in sobriety. However, there are just as great a number of costs and consequences. Plant-processed substance addictions take more lives faster than any other addiction. Substance addictions take a huge toll on the physical body, causing major immune deficiencies, dehydration, severe organ damage, sleep deprivation, and brain damage. Substance addictions progressively inhibit and weaken the mindset, personality, and character of a person as well, creating issues throughout one's life. Now, the opportunity in learning about common plant addictions is to rediscover your relationship to plants and to discover a whole world of nourishing plants, vegetables, herbs, and spices. To learn how to prepare these plants for eating, cleansing, and healing, and to engage and preserve these plants in their ripeness, and to move away from the manufacturing of powders and flours, smoke products, and fermented beverages that are often just bleached, dyed, and then heavily contaminated through the production process. All right, for the last point to mention today is number 4, escape through drugs. Similar to just mentioned, the next category of addiction are the synthetic and pharmaceutical grade drugs produced above ground and underground. Synthetic pharmaceutical and designer drugs mimic the psychoactive properties of molecules derived from natural plant, fungi, and even animal species for medicinal, therapeutic, and recreational purposes, as well as for business profits and other private agenda purposes. Now, of course, this depends on the chemists and manufacturers. There are certainly benevolent-willed chemists dedicated to finding legit medicines to help support people's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual healing. However, there are also malevolent-run chemists that are contracted with mafia who are running their own underground agendas to control, exploit, and even to depopulate civilian life. Regardless of the chemist's original intentions, though, these drugs make their way into the hands of big pharma corporations and underground drug trade runners, ensuring benefits and results on the surface so as to maintain their clientele, but contaminating these substances on a microscopic level to ensure they are addictive and sometimes even poisonous enough to cause death. A great book to better understand the history is called Fentanyl Incorporated: How Rogue Chemists Are Creating the Deadliest Wave of the Opiate Epidemic. The book speaks to many of these synthetically created drugs and the impact on our society today. These classifications of drugs include stimulants, such as amphetamines, methamphetamines, ecstasy, cocaine, nicotine, and caffeine. Depressants like alcohol, benzodiazepines, opiates, and barbiturates. Psychiatric medications like antipsychotics and antidepressants. Over-the-counter drugs like dextromethorphan or DXM, and then there are the steroids and performance enhancers, as well as inhalants such as aerosols, gasoline, paint thinner, and different types of glue. And lastly, a large group of designer and psychoactive synthetic drugs such as spice, bath salts, ketamine, LSD, PCP, 2CB, ecstasy, and fentanyl. The benefits of pharmaceutical-grade synthetic drugs is that it is easier to measure and assure potency, consistency, and scalability of these medicines without hurting the sustainability of certain species. And evidence shows that pharmaceutical and synthetic drugs do have an effect on the body's systems and symptoms, and many people have reported positive benefits. However, each medicine has a degree of negative side effects as well. And one of those negative side effects is that these medicines are prescribed as the only option and can easily become maintenance medications of which a person becomes addicted. In some cases, people can become physically addicted, which is the case with most pharmaceutical medication. For a list of side effects, check out any pharmaceutical drug insert, and you will see a list of nearly every symptom known to man mentioned. So I will just say, when it comes to drug addiction, awareness plus integration is power. Becoming aware of how these drugs are made, why these drugs are made, how they are being used in society, their impact on the human mind and body, their impact on you specifically, and seeing the illusion behind the solution. Just this awareness alone will help you to level up. The integration aspect entails identifying personal blocks and burdens, letting go of attachments, and continuing to refine and temper oneself, or however you see your ongoing personal process unfolding. All right, I will stop here for now, and then I will continue with the next 4 categories of addiction in part 2. to integrate this episode, you can start to identify addictive patterns or addictions that you see in your life from the first 4 categories of addiction mentioned. And then you can start to journal about each one to increase self-awareness and self-understanding. Thank you as always for watching. I look forward to seeing you in part 2 on the types of addiction.